This is an SM Media production. I haven't played since you left Dumbarton in 2019. What have you been doing with yourself, and do you miss playing?
So when I joined Dumbarton, after I'd left Falkirk, the kind of lure to go there, a big part of the incentive to go there was that they offered me a job as well as playing football. My kind of second spell at Falkirk, which I'm sure we'll move on to later, kind of scunnered me quite a lot, to be honest.
Right.
I did have a couple of offers in relation to staying full time, Wraith Rovers being an option and things, but at that point, I wanted to see what else was out there in terms of life after football. So joined Dumbarton, started work on the railway. That coincided with me starting to get quite a bad back, and having probably for the first time in my career out with serious injuries, really struggling with just calf strains, back problems, etc. So that coupled with kind of life on the railway, I didn't take it particularly well. I wasn't enjoying it all that much, I have to say. It was difficult with the night shifts, then trying to play on a Saturday, then training on a Tuesday and Thursday. I've got a little boy as well. It was a lot of commitment. And that transition from full-time to part-time, that was quite a big change for anybody, I think, away from having a job, away from, for the first time ever, away from doing all these things. Just that transition in general was quite tough. So I found myself at a stage where I was at a bit of a crossroads. So I decided to couple up playing with Dumbarton with doing something completely different. So I applied for a job within Sky. Just in a contact centre. These things come with a bit of a reputation, the old contact centre work and answering phones. But I was at a stage where I really had to try something different. And given that I'd left home at 16, I didn't have the platform to go and pick and choose what I wanted to do. As not many people do. A lot of people, or a lot of players, as they move on in their career, that transition from playing to coaching to managing, it comes naturally. But I'd left the game a little bit earlier than most, so 31, 32. So there wasn't that natural progression. So I really did have to go and look for something else. So I did that, and I absolutely love working there. I really do. And I coupled that up with playing with Dumbarton. But the first kind of a year working with Sky and kind of trying to juggle playing with Dumbarton, my back was knackered, Scott, to be totally honest. I had a prolapsed disc in my spine. I needed an operation if I wanted to get back playing anytime soon. Dumbarton had basically said, look, we're not really comfortable with you getting this operation, us funding it, and then it's going to take a long time to recover, and will you actually get back? So we basically came to an agreement where I left the club, and I really put my focus on Sky. I'm now at a stage where I've been there for 2 years. I'm now part of an in-house programme where they give you the tools and the skills to go on and manage within the business. So hopefully that's just over the horizon for me, as well as having a lot of things to do with football in terms of my UEFA A licence and things. That coupled up with the kind of spell I've been through with Sky, I've really got my head down. I've worked really, really hard over the last 2 years, asked loads of questions, been really proactive in my own development, and I'm now at a stage where effectively for a year I'm doing a manager's role, which is great.
Brilliant. You grew up in Stranraer and began your career at Kilmarnock at the age of 16. What were your early years at Kilmarnock like?
They were amazing, to be fair. Probably looking back now, probably 2 of the best years of my career, funnily enough. It was the least money I've ever earned, and it was, it wasn't playing first team football or anything. But when I look back at the experiences and the times, it was really good. Obviously, leaving home at 16 is a big step for anybody. Your very own Mark Wilson's parents took me in, and so I lived with them for 2 years whilst I was at the club. And Mark, as much as he's a wind-up merchant, he proper looked after me in terms of himself, his mum and dad, and made it really easy for me to make that transition from going from my own home where I grew up for 16 years to a brand new place, brand new town, city, whatever you want to call it. And it was really, really good. It's changed so much, football, since those days. I look back at the things we had to do. It was a full-time job. I would report at 8:30 and leave at 4:30 with the managers. Obviously, the managers told you could leave. It wasn't a case of, these days you finish training, you get in the shower and you leave as a young boy. But no, back then it was really good. First year there, we used to train at different parts of Ayrshire, whether that be Troon, Irvine, wherever it may be, wherever we could get a pitch.
Yeah.
So we used to go in. Auchincrew was a big one. We used to train down there quite a lot. So what I used to do was I used to walk round every morning from the digs and go to the club. But it was me and another local lad, Peter Logan, who's went on to have quite an interesting career at the moment. He's still in the game in a completely different capacity. So I'll get onto that in just a second. But so it was me and him every morning. We used to go in. But back in those days, you used to deflate the balls every day after training. You used to then inflate them for training, then deflate them again at the end of the day to keep them as right as they could be, keep them in the best condition so that we didn't have to go through, hordes and hordes of balls throughout the season. You used to strap the goals onto the van. You used to throw the nets onto the van, the pegs, everything. You used to build everything from scratch, take it down at the end of training, clean boots, go in, clean the stadium. You did everything from scratch. So because I was a local, stayed local, it was me and Peter that got the brunt of it, to be totally honest with you. So it was an experience, but it was good as well. And on the playing side as well, obviously playing for the under-19s on a Saturday. The reserve league used to be on a Monday night then, but again, it wasn't a development league back then.
Yeah,
you'd play Rangers or Celtic in the reserve league on a Monday night. There'd be 2,000-3,000 people there. Mm-hmm. You'd be mixing with the boys that didn't play first team for Celtic or Rangers on the Saturday. So big names. And as a 16, 17-year-old, unbelievable exposure to that type of environment. And it really does. It makes that transition from youth player, reserve player to first team so much easier. Whereas nowadays, there's a bit of cotton wool wrapped around everybody, and that there is no, it's all development and protecting everybody. And back in those days, there was none of that, and it really set everybody up for whether you were able to make it or not, and have a career in football, I think.
Mm-hmm, definitely. What does that guy do now?
So Peter Logan. So basically, what happened was I left Kilmarnock obviously after a couple of years. And Peter got released, but he texted me a few weeks later, to say, Rory, the manager's phoning me. What do you think he wants? Jim Jeffries. I was like, I don't know, Peter, you need to phone him back. So he phoned him back, and like I said, so it was a guy, Manny Fowler, great guy. He was a kit man at the time, really good guy. So we used to see the second year. We used to train at the Science Centre, the Science Parks up in Glasgow. So every morning, me and Peter, and there used to be Manny and then one other seat in the front of the van, and Jamie Hamill used to sit there as well. So me and Peter used to have to switch, and one of us would sit in the back of the van with the gear. Nice seat, nothing, just in with all the gear on the way up the road. So that was an experience as well. But so he because Peter was quite hands-on with helping Manny with loads of things, Manny had left, and Jim Jeffries had phoned Peter to ask if he wanted to be the kit man.
Right.
So Peter was a kit man at Kilmarnock for years and years and years. And then he ended up at St Mirren as the kit man, and Jack Ross really took to him. So he's now the Hibs kit man. I seen him the other day on the telly lifting up the old substitute scoreboard thing. So he's currently at Hibs as the kit man. So he's carved a decent career for himself. Probably not the career he thought he'd have in football, but there you go.
Brilliant. Rangers signed in 2006 and you go into the youth team. How much did you enjoy this period, and who were the good players in that team when you went there?
So the first 6 months was tough, I would say. It's the first 6 months, obviously moving out of digs where you still effectively got people looking after you, cooking your meals. And like I said, it was a home environment there for me. It wasn't, I call it digs, it wasn't digs. It was like it was second home for me.
Yeah.
So going through that to literally being put in a flat, being told this is where you're staying for 2 years, and your flatmate for the next 2 years will be here in an hour. I've never met him before. So it turns out he was a South African lad, Dean Furman, his name was.
Yeah, that's right. That was the guy who came to Chelsea.
Came for Chelsea. He made a couple of appearances in the first team. He probably should have got more opportunities. He was good. I think as well, when we, growing up in Scotland, Rangers and Celtic are the focal point of every conversation of every season. So there is a little bit of an aura around the place when you first join. It's Rangers. Whereas he came for Chelsea, he was English, grew up in London with South African family. That kind of little bit of aura wasn't there for him because he didn't know enough about it. So he came up with a bit between his teeth and didn't really have that. We got Barry Ferguson's and all the different people that we kind of looked up to, and were a little bit like, he just kind of came in and took the bull by the horns type thing, and he did really well. He probably should have got more of an opportunity. So, but he's went on to have several caps for South Africa and national team and things. I think he's back in England now. He's just had a little one and he's playing for Carlisle United. But so lived with him for 2 years. We got on great. Really, really good. I was a little bit disappointed. I don't want to say promised the world, but Ian Durrant played a big part in taking me from Kilmarnock to Rangers. And at that particular time, before you've signed, you're told you're going to get fast-tracked, you're going to be part of the first team squad, you're going to get exposure to training with the first team. And when I went to Rangers, I quickly found out that I think everybody had been told that. So we made up the nucleus of the youth team squad effectively, the under-19s for my first couple of seasons there, which to be fair was amazing. We went toe-to-toe with Celtic. We had a really good team at the time. Your Paul Caddises, Mark Miller, and a few others. So, ourselves, we had Stevie Lennon, Andrew Shinney, who's now at Charlton on loan. It's a good career down in England. Played up in Inverness for a spell. So, likes of him, and obviously a couple of years ahead of me was your Charlie Adams, Stevie Smith, Alan Huttons, that kind of age group who'd kind of progressed into the first team at this point, and things. So, yeah. There's a couple of boys from that kind of period which have had the best career. In terms of that period of time, the player who's went on to have the best career was probably Nazy, Stephen Naismith. Obviously, playing with him at Kilmarnock, he played in the odd youth team game now and then. He would play with him every now and then in the reserve team if he wasn't playing for the first team. He was still young at that point. So in terms of the person who's went on to have the player who's went on to have the most kind of lucrative career from that point was probably Nazy. And I think that just shows you as well how much playing can benefit you at a young age. Nazy wasn't part of a youth setup where, I was playing in the reserve team at one point, Scott, and I looked around me and, Barry Ferris was coming back for injury. I was only youth team player in the reserve team. It was made up of first team players, Stevie Whittaker when Kirk Broadfoot was playing right back, Christian Daly, Tam Buffel, Sibo. I know obviously he had a bit of an up and down career, but Sionko, Walter Smith brought in a lot of players. So to try and compete and to get to a stage where you were actually going to get an opportunity was really, really tough. But I suppose that's the nature of it. So, looking back now, I suppose I asked myself, if I'd stayed at Kilmarnock, I probably would have got more opportunities. I had a sit down with Jim Jeffries. I was just a young boy. I had my first agent, sat down there, and Jim Jeffries was quite, as he could be, to the point. He does not mince his words. I've met him a couple of times since, actually, and he seems to have softened in his old age. He talks away, but back then he was... He sat me down and was basically told me how it was, and I was like, I knew in my head I was going to be moving on, but the transition from there to Rangers was good, because that first season at Rangers, like I said, we went toe-to-toe with Celtic. It went down to the last game of the season in terms of the league. We played them in the final of the Youth Cup. I think there was 12,000 at Hampden to see it,
that's right.
Which is a pretty big occasion. I was injured for that, unfortunately. I played right the way through up until that point. But we won the league, we won the cup, and it was really, really good. And then obviously moving on to the kind of reserve team and being a bit of an older player there, I managed to make a couple of appearances, which, given the time it was, they were getting to European finals, they were, winning the league, they were getting to domestic cup finals on a regular basis. So to have made a couple of appearances with the likes of Stevie Davis, Pedro Mendes, Charlie Adam, Carlos Cuellar, it was an achievement looking back, but at the time I was just desperate to play more football. But obviously it never came to fruition at Rangers.
What were your loan spells like at Dunfermline and St Mirren?
At Dunfermline it was good, really enjoyed it. It was tough. It was the first time I'd been around a first team environment, and there was an expectation on me to perform at first team level, and the consequences of not performing where you didn't play, or the manager would be under pressure, or the fans would be on your back. At youth team level, you don't experience that so much. There's no an expectation on you, but a loan signing coming for Rangers, doesn't matter what age you are, you're expected to contribute. And I started really, really well. It was only, I think, for a short period of time initially. I'd made my first team debut for Rangers in the November, went in the January for, I think it was maybe only even a month, but I started really well. Performed my first appearance away to Queen of the South, came on as a sub because I'd only signed the day before, did really well. And, within 3 weeks, they wanted to extend it to the end of the season. So as young boys do and young players do, my form dipped in and out, but overall it was a good experience. It was a bit of an eye-opener is what I would say. Jim McIntyre went through me a couple of times, to say the least. There was one example down at Morton where the ball came to me in the halfway line and I went to chest it down. We were under a bit of pressure at this point. Like I said, we'd started really well. Valentine's Day, I'd scored the goal, which had taken us, I think, joint second in the league. It was the year St Johnstone went up. They went on a ridiculously good run. I think they hold the record for the most games unbeaten in that league in a row. But it was pretty tight up until around that time. And then we go to Morton. I chest the ball in the halfway line. The ball gets nicked off me. They attack. The ball goes out for a corner. Gets whipped in. Goes out for another corner. Gets whipped in. Gets cleared off the line. Second phase comes back in and they scored. So I've given the ball away, but I'm going to say 3 or 4 attacks later, they've scored. So we went into the changing room after the game. I think we get beat 1-0 maybe. And I'm sitting there thinking, I actually did okay in the game. And then the captain at the time had turned round and went, I'll not repeat what he said, but basically called me slack and no caring or whatever else. And I was a half expectancy on the manager there at that point to defend me, but he went right through me. And I think that's when I realised, this is the real world. This is proper first team football, especially at championship level, where people are, Scott Wilson was the captain. He did a great career, but there's boys scrapping every week for their appearance fees. There's boys scrapping every week for their win bonus, getting on for that 15 minutes or performing or staying in the team for the following week. It was dog eat dog. It really was. And that exposure to first team football at Dunfermline was, it was tough, but it gave me a good grounding. And I went back to Rangers definitely in a better place than I was. I've scored, I think, 3 or 4 goals, but my frustration probably was that I was playing out on the left-hand side, which at that particular time, again, being a young boy, I was used to playing up front. I was used to running the channels, taking the ball in, but no offence to the boys at that level, but playing with players who would play football. With Dunfermline, it wasn't always like that. Although you had good players, it would be a scrap a lot of weeks. I think that's fair to say. And getting used to that was tough. And I think transitioning to the left-hand side, where at that age, you need to have a good understanding of your positional sense, of how the team works, of defending, of running back. And just working within that formation was tough. I was 19, I think I was 19 or 20. And like I said, playing up front was a different ball game because, you could kind of get away with doing what you wanted. And, I was good at scoring goals. I was good at making goals, creating things. But with that, playing out on the left-hand side, a game or two when I was maybe playing so well, my confidence went a wee bit. I was out the team, but then I went back in the team. Mm-hmm. But overall, it was a great experience. Jim McIntyre was brilliant. I really, really enjoyed working with him. He was very honest, very upfront. He would speak to you all the time. Made some really good friends there. In terms of my time there, Stevie Bell, Graham Holmes, there was a lot of boys, Nicky Finn, I used to travel in with, that my experiences there were amazing. Really, really loved my time at Dunfermline, like I said. I probably would have liked to have played more, but overall, I think I'd made maybe 18 or 19 appearances, which in a 6-month period was good for me at that time. Mm-hmm. So the Mirren one was, so I came back to Rangers, continued to play in the youth team, then I literally got a phone call. I was playing darts round at my mate's house, and I literally got a phone call to say, you're going to St Mirren in the morning on loan. They were in the Premier League, and they had quite well-known strikers. So I'm looking at it going, right, I've got 3 hours to make up my mind, or I thought I could make up my mind. And, you had your Billy Mehmets, your Craig Dargos, your Michael Higdens, experienced professionals who'd been around the block, who knew what they were doing, who, big boys who could hold themselves. So I'm looking at that going, well, am I going to play here? But there was a rule at the time, Scott, where you had to have 3 under-19s, or there was a particular rule, 3 under-21s or something in your match day squad. Yeah. So at the time, there was actually boys who would probably, be playing some weeks that actually had to be sacrificed if they weren't starting and not even being in the squad. Aye. Because you had to make room. And St Mirren at the time didn't have a lot of youth players, so literally they were sitting 15 and 16-year-old boys on the bench. So my fear was that I was going to go there and I was just going to sit on the bench because I was a better option than a 16-year-old. Yeah. And so ended up going there probably against, had it been 5 or 6 years down the line, I probably would have had more about me to say, no, I'm not going there. But at that time, Walter Smith told me I was going there. Nice. So I went and I made my debut at Easter Road the following day and I came on and did fine. But the following week, it was Higden and Mehmet, Dargo on after 60. The following week, it was the same. My confidence went downhill and wasn't training particularly well at all. And the whole experience just turned into a complete negative for me. I never played. I wasn't training well because nobody was talking to me. Andy Millen was brilliant. I used to go and speak to him regularly and he would kind of talk to me about whatever else. But looking back now, I should have cut that short. I really should have cut that short and just said, listen, this is a waste of time. I never get any opportunities. never played. I was basically used as exactly what my fear was at the start. Having said that, I wasn't doing enough in training to maybe merit a place, but there's got to be an understanding, I think, that you've brought me in. You've not given me any opportunities. You know, you're asking me to, there was a lot of games at that time, Saturday, Tuesday. You're asking me to train on a Monday and a Thursday to try and make an impression to get a game on a Saturday, but you're never ever selecting me. Even towards the end of the season, Scott, like we were playing for nothing the last 2 games, and I still never got an opportunity. So it was a little bit like, it was just a waste of time. And looking back now, I just don't understand it. And, you know, towards my end of my time with Rangers, I had more about me at that point. So when I went back to Rangers, you know, I'd kind of spoken to Ali McCoist about it, and he'd kind of admitted himself I wasn't treated particularly well at St Mirren, or not that I wasn't treated particularly well, because I understand that Gus McPherson's there, he's scrapping for his job, his team's fighting relegation, he's picking what he thinks is his best team, but there's still got to be an element of communication there.
Yeah.
So again, the squad was great, the boys were great, nothing bad to say about Gus McPherson at all, because I completely understand it, but at that stage, for me personally, it was just a waste of time.
Yeah, definitely. Rangers gave you 2 new contracts and you made your debut against Inverness. Did Walter Smith tell you about getting a future run in the first team, and what was the feeling like to make your debut at Ibrox?
Oh, it was amazing. It's something I'd worked towards since I was probably 8 years old. You know, I grew up in Stranraer, where opportunities are limited. If you want to make a career in football, you need to be committed, and that's not just me, that's my family as well. You know, I'd played local football in Stranraer, and then Govan. Everyone thinks I say Govan when I'm saying that. I'm saying Govan, the Ayrshire town. You know, I started playing with them on a Saturday. Did well. You know, it was fair to say I was the standout player in that team. Then ended up moving further up that road to Ayr United. And, you know, these are training sessions on a Tuesday and a Thursday and a Saturday, playing on a Saturday. So my dad used to take me up and doing it all the time. I'd finish school, go up, back down again. So it was really difficult to kind of forge a career in football, is what I would say. Then I ended up obviously going to Kilmarnock, and then from there to Rangers again. So, you know, the 2 new contracts Rangers gave me, it felt amazing to have put all that work in and that commitment to my mum and dad to be there, watch me run out at Ibrox, something I'd worked towards since I'd been, you know, so young. And yeah, it was an amazing experience. We're 5-0 up, and it was a double substitution. It was me and Barry Ferguson. Barry Ferguson had been out for a good few months with an ankle injury, so I made my debut. He came back for injury at the same time, and we came on obviously at the same time. The roar went up. At that time as well, young boys just didn't play. They didn't make appearances. Walter Smith had a big turnaround job to do when Paul Le Guen left. Paul Le Guen was great in terms of youth players and giving you exposure to train with the first team and giving you experiences and proper put a focus on the youth players, but he wasn't getting results on the park. Walter Smith came in and signed a barrel load of players and was unbelievably successful. But with that came more players in the first team pool, became less opportunities for the younger boys. So to make that debut, the fans, I think, looked at it at that particular time going, this boy must be doing well, because, you know, youth players don't really come through. Don't get me wrong, on the back of that, your Danny Wilsons, your Greg Wilds, these boys started to come through, but at that particular time, there wasn't a lot. So I came on and I did fine. I'll never forget one that, you know, I think it was Chris Burke. I don't quote me on that. It was somebody who was running down the left-hand side anyway. And I was arriving on the penalty spot. And I'm not saying I was going to score, but I had the keeper to beat pretty much if Nacho steps over it. But Nacho ended up trying to shoot, which, to be fair, if I was him, I would have done it all. But, you know, I think the way I played in the reserve team, I was a goal scorer. There were probably better footballers than me at that particular time, but I would score every single week. So I knew that if I could go on and score, that gets people talking. So that was my sole focus in that game, was just get the ball in the net. It doesn't matter if it comes off your arse, comes off your head. It doesn't matter. Just get the ball in the net. But we were 5-0 up against Inverness. You've got Bugera doing stepovers down the left-hand side and then cutting back. And the game was dead with 35 minutes to go. So I struggled to make an impact, it's fair to say. But then on the radio driving home, you know, hearing Walter Smith on the radio, obviously was asked about me. He'd said I'd earned my place. I was there on merit. It wasn't to do with this rule, obviously the 21s rule, and that I would be getting more experience with the first team squad. But obviously a month later, I found myself at Dunfermline.
Yeah. Then after Rangers, Carlisle signed you. Were you excited to test yourself down south, and how did you feel about leaving Rangers?
I was disappointed to leave Rangers, but I was 23. I had to play. So what had happened was we'd played Carlisle in a bounce game. There was a centre back down there who'd had a bad injury, so he came back for his injury. And because obviously Carlisle's just the other side of the border, they had arranged a bounce game with Rangers, and I'd played in it. So I'd scored 2, scored a penalty, missed a penalty, and scored for open play. Carlisle needed a striker at the time, and so there was a bit of interest from that point moving forward. But obviously, I remember that I'd scored just as many goals in the reserve league as I was scoring my whole career in terms of when I'd been at Rangers. So it was a little bit of a crossroads in terms of Rangers were playing, I think, St Mirren at home and Inverness at home the next 2 games. So it was like a period of 2 games where they'd be expected to win. So my agent had said to me, I'd changed agents at this point. My agent had said, look, you've got nothing to lose here. Go to Walter Smith and just say, listen, throw me in for 2 games, see how I do. If I don't do it, at least I can leave going, I know I wasn't good enough, or at least I've had an opportunity. So obviously, I had a little bit more about me that I'd experienced enough and been around the game enough to be able to hold myself. So it was Ali McCoist ended up speaking to about it. Now I think Coisty liked me because I could score a goal, and that's what he was a master at. So he liked I could sniff out a goal, but I wasn't a particularly big physical presence, and I wouldn't really put myself about. That wasn't an aspect of my game, and I don't know. I just never got the impression that Walter Smith thought I was going to make the grade. So I decided to speak to Coisty about it. So I went and said to him, listen, I've got Carlisle knocking on the door to have a look at me, to go down for a week or 2. I said, I want to play here. Like, give me an opportunity. What he basically said was, listen, you're out of contract in 6 months. Go down to Cowdenbeath, play there, see how you get on, and we can talk in the summer. And I kind of was like, well, I've been to Dunfermline, who, no disrespect to Cowdenbeath, were a better team than Cowdenbeath in that division. I'd played enough games to say that period had done me well.
Yeah.
I didn't see at that point how scoring even 10 goals for Cowdenbeath in a 3-month period was going to get me an opportunity with Rangers, with the squad they had. So I said, listen, can you just go speak to the manager, sit down with him, and see how keen. So I ended up actually speaking to the manager as well. And basically, it was ciphered back to me, listen, that's not going to happen. You're not going to get an opportunity in the next 2 games. So they were really pushing for me to go to Cowdenbeath. And Jimmy Nicholl was there at the time. And Walter Smith, I think, was good pals with Jimmy Nicholl as far as I could read through the lines at the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it wasn't the move for me. It didn't feel right. Just like the St Mirren one didn't at the time. So I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to Carlisle. I'm going to train there for 2 weeks and see what comes of it. So I went down there and I trained for a week. And what had happened was I was all ready to pack my bags to go down on the Sunday night to get ready, stay at my mum and dad's who stayed in Dumfries, to then drive across to Carlisle, train, see how we got on. So just about to leave on the Sunday night, gets a phone call from my agent. Rory, Carlisle got a great result at the weekend, so the manager down there's giving them the Monday off. I was like, right, okay. Went in, trained at Rangers on the Monday, went down on the Monday night, trained on the Tuesday, did pretty well, trained on the Thursday. They asked me back on the Friday. I trained pretty well all week, to be fair, and they were after a striker, so the manager had said, listen, come back in next week, but I want to talk to you pretty early. So I ended up, by the following Friday, they'd offered me a 2.5-year contract, which was quite a good feeling, to be fair, because it was a good level. It was League One at the time. Now, they were banging on the door of the playoffs, so it was a great move for me at the time. I wasn't going to play at Rangers. The thought of going to League One in England with the opportunity to do well, that opens up so many doors, as opposed to going to Cowdenbeath on loan with that uncertainty of, you've got to remember as well, Scott, away from the fact that you want to play at Rangers, if you go on loan to Cowdenbeath for 6 months and you don't do particularly well, what's your next move after that?
Aye.
I'm not sure you're getting a club. So at that stage, the security of a 2.5-year deal down in England to develop was, I couldn't turn it down. So I went back up the road, and there was a youth team there manager at the time, Jim Sinclair, who I think has appeared in Sunderland documentaries since, who was pretty difficult to work with, I would say, as a young boy. And he'd professed to me how Carlisle weren't interested in me, and it was a stone's throw from Murray Park in terms of the UK, and if they really wanted me, they would have watched me, and this was nonsense, and Cowdenbeath was the one to go to, and all the rest of it, trying to push me down a path I didn't want to go down. So to go back to him and say, listen, they've offered me a 2.5-year deal, felt good. So anyway, ends up leaving Rangers, signs for Carlisle, and so the manager had said to me at that point in time, look, you're not going to play a lot of games between now and the end of the season. I've kind of got my team. We're actually doing well. They were in the semi-final of the Johnstone's Paint Trophy as well.
Yeah.
They beat Huddersfield 4-0 at home, and the second leg was in a couple of weeks after I signed. So the team was doing well. It wasn't like they weren't doing well. And so I went down there, and I did exactly what you said. Played 7 or 8 games, and started 7 or 8 games. Made loads of appearances. Came on in the final at Wembley in the JPT. We won that, and went and played plenty of games down in bigger stadiums. Played down at Charlton, Swindon. The league, all the League One grounds, which was great. League One's a strange league because at one end you've got your Yeovils, which Crawleys and all these different places, which are not the most desirable places to play. But at the top half of the league, you've got your Charltons, you've got your Portsmouth, Southampton were in the league at the time, so yeah. I played at St Mary's. I ended up starting that game. So loads of different experiences in the first 6 months. But moving on to the following season, the manager basically threw down the gauntlet to say, right, this is your year. And I was a little bit disappointed not to start the season because he'd kind of said, well, it's a clean slate. And I started the season really, really well in terms of pre-season, but I never started the first game. So the way my contract worked at Carlisle, because they'd seen me playing a bounce game at Rangers, and they'd seen me over a 2-week trial period. They basically said, right, this is your contract. I wasn't earning what other first team boys would earn, but the manager said, if you can make 25 starts for me next season, as in the season I was just about to go into, then we'll sit down and we'll talk about a new contract. We'll not put anything in writing, but we'll sit down and we'll agree on a new contract on a wage which mirrors a first team player at Carlisle.
Yeah.
So I thought, brilliant, that's absolutely fine. I still had 2 years left. It was the summer. I'd played a lot of games. Then I broke into the team quite early in the season. We had a really poor result first game of the season against Notts County. I didn't play that game, but got into the team. I was playing every week. Funnily enough, I was playing on the left-hand side, and I must have just been more mature as a player at that point because I was doing well. I was playing every single week. Gets to my 25th appearance. So obviously it's in my head. It's Boxing Day 2011. I'd made 24 starts that year, which is good. If I keep going at that rate with the amount of games in League One, I'm on to start 50 games in League One, and we were flying. We're doing really. We'd signed Lee Miller, we had John Paul McGovern.
Yeah.
So with the 3 Scottish boys up front, we got on really well off the pitch. Everything was just falling into place. So 24 starts later, got to make my 25th start. In the back of my head, going, it was a sellout at Deepdale, Preston, 20,000 fans. We had 4,500 down the road for that. It was incredible. 8 minutes in, I knew Davy Gray. I was playing against Davy Gray. I played against him a couple of times at right back, and I thought, he's going to let me know he's there. He's not the best defender in the world, but he's hard in the tackle. Lo and behold, 8 minutes in, boom, snapped my leg in 3 places. So I'm lying on the ground, I'm looking down. It was a proper like Henrik Larsson one where it's like, it's just gone. So obviously I'm on the ground, legs mangled, lying there going, obviously all the things pass through your head in the instant. So my body went into shock, but as I'm getting wheeled off, it took about 10 minutes to get me off the pitch. I'm thinking, well, this was going so well. I was getting linked with championship teams, Ipswich, amongst a couple of others. So at that point in time, I was absolutely loving it. And I was also in the back of my head going, well, we're going to sit down after this game, and I've done well enough to go in and say, well, I want to earn as much as anybody else is earning. Like I've done that well. Yeah. But obviously, I broke my leg in 3 places. A club like Carlisle can't afford to hand out contracts to boys who are injured, especially going to be injured for about a year. So to say that was disappointing is an understatement. I was really enjoying the football, and then Lee got injured maybe a couple of months later, and we ended up finishing 1 place out of the playoffs. And a season which had so much potential just ended up being so disappointing on a number of levels. Spoke to the manager, Greg Abbott, who I absolutely loved working with down there. He was a really good guy. He was a good guy. I loved working with him, but he pulled me in and basically said, listen, we can't offer you anything more than you're on at the moment. You've got another 1.5 years left. He says, we'll give you an extension for a year on the same money. But at that point, I was like, you know what, I'll just see how it goes. But I had so many complications with that injury, and it took me so long to get back from it that, too much time had elapsed. I got back in the team actually that happened on Boxing Day 2011, and I ended up making my next appearance on New Year's Day 2013. But obviously it took me a month or two to get back into the swing of things, and I had a run in the team, and I scored 3 or 4 goals, but probably it's fair to say I never wasn't properly recovered at that point.
Yeah.
And I'd went from that game before 2011, the world was at my feet. It really was. To a year and a half later, being released for Carlisle and not having a club, and my agent telling me, listen, you've kind of fell off the face of the earth in terms of football. You've not properly played in 18 months, so we're going to need to be patient this summer. So I went into that summer with no job and really just waiting for a phone call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You joined Falkirk. Were you excited to work with Gary Holt?
Aye. Obviously, Gary Holt, in terms of management, is a different prospect to what he was then. Mm-hmm. If anyone was to say you were going to work under Gary Holt now, they would look forward to that. They'd be excited about that because his track record at Falkirk and at Livingston is exceptional. So I think it's a different prospect then, but obviously back then it was his first experience with management. So I went in on trial. It was late on in the summer. I had my ball in my hand. I had my boots on, ready to go down the Glasgow Green, and another day of running, another day of looking after myself in terms of just waiting on a phone call. So I gets a phone call that night to say, listen, come up to Forfar. There's a trial game for Falkirk, and Lyle Taylor's going to be leaving, so he's going to go down to Sheffield United. They're looking for a striker. So I says, brilliant, right, okay, that's fine. So ends up going to Falkirk on trial, goes up to Forfar, and it was the youngest squad I've ever seen. I thought it was a creche I was walking into. And I thought, geez, what's going on here? Because League One England is Saturday, Tuesday. It's big. You're playing against big men. Mm-hmm. They're not the most technically gifted, but they're physical. Yeah. So I went from that to the other end of the spectrum, going on trial with Falkirk. Some of them obviously weren't all there was a lot of younger boys in the squad as well. And I thought, what have I got myself into here? And then they got the balls out and they were just popping the ball, pass. And I thought, maybe I've thought to myself too early here. This is a good standard. That's one thing Gary Holt always did at Falkirk. He put good football and entertainment over, I don't want to say results, but it was more important to him to build a team that was good at football, that were entertaining, and they looked forward to a Saturday, than a team that would just grind out a result here and there. And I think that worked so well with our group of players. We had so many young players, Conor McGrandles, Will Volks, who's now at Cardiff, myself, who was still relatively young, 24. We had a really good goalie in Michael McGovern, and Craig Sibbald. We had loads of young talent there. Stephen Kingsley, Jay Fulton. These boys have went on to have good Premier League careers, now playing in the Championship. Obviously, Kingsley's now at Hearts. So we had the nucleus. We didn't know it at the time, obviously, because we were all still young and you don't know how anyone's going to develop. But I remember scoring against Forfar, which was a good start, obviously. And then we got a penalty. So I picks up the ball, and there's a midfielder who comes up to me who'd just signed. And he'd said, I missed one in training last week, and the boys were laughing at me like, can I have it? Let me have it. He's trying to take the ball off me. And I was like, no, I'm taking it. And he went, well, come on. I said, listen, mate, I'm playing for a job here. I think that realisation kind of hit him, and he went, fair enough, like, you take it. Right. So I took it, scored it, was fine, played fine the rest of the game, came off, and then played a couple more trial games, agreed a contract. Yeah, I agreed a contract and went from there. And we were training at Alloa at the time. They put the plastic pitch down at Falkirk, so we're waiting on that getting laid before we could train on that. Now it's a totally different pitch to what it is now. Back then, when it was first laid, it was the best Astro in the country by a mile. That's 100. That's for sure. I heard Gary Holt on the radio recently on Super Scoreboard actually speaking about having the green pellets and how it looked and the difference it made to the psychology of it, and not having the black pellets, which everyone dreaded. There was something about those black pellets, I think. So we got the pitch down, got training on it, and it suited us to a T. We were a very good footballing team, very, very good footballing team. And I went on to have a great season. I think I scored 24 goals, got nominated for Player of the Year, got Players Player of the Year within the club. and we just missed out on getting promoted. It was so disappointing. I still believe that us and Hamilton were the best team in the league that year. It was a strange one because we actually finished 3 points behind Dundee, who finished top, but they did have the players to grind out a 1-0 when they needed to. It was a strange one. Dundee, I think we got 3 wins and a draw against Dundee. They never beat us. Hamilton never beat Dundee, and we couldn't beat Hamilton, so we all cancelled each other out. So it was the results against the other teams. We went to Dumbarton, which was a pivotal game. I think we were about 15 points off the pace or something ridiculous in November. In mid-February, we'd won like 9 on the bounce, and we found ourselves clear at the top. Then we went to Dumbarton, and we were 1-0 up, and we threw that one away, and it finished 2-1. And I think little moments like that just showed the slight inexperience in the squad at times, and it cost us in the end. But to finish 3 points off top, a lot of people, I think, tipped us to struggle that year. I was an unknown quantity in terms of the championship in Scotland. A lot of the young boys hadn't really played much. So we were so unlucky to miss out on promotion, we really were. And then we went on to the playoffs and we beat Queen of the South. We went down there, get beat 2-0. Went back to our place, 1-3-1 in extra time. We scored another, went through, played Hamilton. This was the first year that the playoffs the way they are. They were set up. So went on to play Hamilton, drew 1 each at our place. We went to Hamilton on the Saturday, and we conceded a goal early, and we just cancelled each other out. It finished 1-0, and that was the famous one where Jason Cummins said he could open a tin of beans in the final. Remember, he scored 2-0 at Hamilton, spanked one in the top bin with his left peg. They were 2-0 up, going into the leg at Easter Road, and took Hamilton for granted. We knew how good Hamilton were, and Hamilton knew how good we were. And I remember being on holiday, and I watched the game from a bar in Tenerife. Sure enough, Hamilton came out, popped the ball around, scored again. Tony Andrew had a great year that year, and they won on penalties. It just shows you the moments as well. Look what Alec Neil's done since then. You know, you look at Alec Neil. If Hibs had won that penalty shootout and he'd stayed in the Championship, for me, he got his move to Norwich, quite rightly so, on the back of being top of the Premier League. I think he was in something ridiculous, like November or something, with his Hamilton team when they got promoted. So small margins and small lines in football make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. The Scottish Cup final was your last appearance for Falkirk. What was the memories of that day?
Overwhelming disappointment, I think. I think everyone knew that it was an end of an era in terms of a couple of boys moving on. I was moving on. Mick was moving on, Mick McGovern. I tell a lie, it was Jamie McDonald that year actually. Mick had already moved on. But there was a bit of a kind of end of season, end of era feel to it, but it was all geared up to the final. We'd had a little bit of a disappointing season within the league campaign. I got injured in the quarterfinals of the Cup down at Queen of the South. I'd signed a pre-contract with Dundee. I did so well the first year, and I'd started the following season really, really well as well. So I had quite a lot of interest from the bottom half of the Premiership, and a couple of teams within the Championship as well. But in terms of the Championship, I was happy at Falkirk. I would quite like to have went back down south to give it a bash, but it looked like I was going to need to wait till the summer to see if that was going to come to fruition. But Paul Hartley Dundee was quite keen on taking me, and he'd put an offer down which I couldn't really say no to, let's put it that way. So it's a 3-year deal, and it was money that I wasn't prepared to turn down at that point, given how hard I'd worked to get back to a point where, you know, with the whole Carlisle contract situation and the injury and all that, I felt like I owed it to myself to sign that contract, because my concern was that obviously between there and the end of the season, it was in the back of my head, if I get injured again, which is quite a negative way of thinking. But I think when you've been through that experience, it's inevitable you're going to have that train of thought. So signed the pre-contract. The following week on BT Sports, played Rangers, scored, got man of the match, got interviewed after the match. I'm sitting there going, have I went too early here? Should I have just bided my time? Following week, we plays on BBC One on a Friday night, and we play Queen of the South away in the quarterfinals of the Cup, and I got a hairline fracture in my leg, my other leg. So I was out for 14 weeks. My next appearance was the final. So that was difficult. Our league form had dipped, and we'd come away. I think we'd finished 5th. We didn't even make the playoffs, but we'd made the Scottish Cup final. I actually went into that game knowing that we had more than enough to win the game against Inverness. Obviously, we'd won on the Saturday against Hibs. The following day, Inverness were playing Celtic. Now, in our head, Celtic had won that game, but
Yeah.
I think they went 1-2 up, and it was the one with the handball on the line. I don't know if you remember it.
Yeah.
Aye. So Inverness ended up going through. So all of a sudden, we've got an unbelievable chance to win a major trophy. I think at that point, a team out with the Premier League hadn't won the Scottish Cup since 1958 or something ridiculous. So we'd spent a week down in Swansea preparing. Swansea had a good connection with Swansea because Jay Fulton had went down there, and Stephen Kingsley. So one of our other youth players had went down there as well. So they said, come down here for the week. We'll put you up in a hotel. We'll look after you. You can use our training pitches. It's just a way of kind of bonding before the final, because we didn't have another game because of the way the league worked. Inverness were still playing in the league. They had 3-4 league games left and our season had finished.
Yeah.
So we had to find a way of keeping ticking over. We had to find a way of keeping the morale and the togetherness up. So we went down there and did that, and came back up, got prepared for the final, stayed at it was Cameron House or Moor Hall, it might have been. When I was at Rangers, these things were a regular occurrence when you were playing in an Old Firm game or a Champions League match, which I was involved in quite a few times. So, that was, but with a club like Falkirk, staying at the Moor Hall was a big deal. So it had a cup final feel about it, which was really, really good. I think we all wanted to win it for a number of reasons. Obviously, all being so young, we wanted to kind of prove the doubters wrong. Everybody wanted us in the semi-final, Scott. It was Inverness, Celtic and Hibs. It was common knowledge that everybody wanted to draw Falkirk. You would hear it on the radio, you would hear it here and there, you would hear it on the phone-ins, or if we can get... Hibs ended up getting us and we ended up beating Hibs. We were capable of doing that. We really were. And then comes to the final, the manager sets his stall out with one up front, just myself, to kind of, I think, have enough players in midfield to be able to get a grip of the game, is what I would say. We had Will kind of holding midfield, Will Volks, Sibs just beyond him as well. Good players on the ball to try and get a hold of the ball, to try and play our way into the game. Inverness had a lot of the ball. Your Tansy and things, again, they're good, experienced players. They get on the ball, they switch it from side to side. John Hughes teams are notorious for keeping the ball. It can be a slog when you're playing against a John Hughes team because they don't give the ball away. And they recycle it and recycle it and recycle it. They don't hurt you in the final third all that often, but your concentration can go very easily against John Hughes' teams because, like I said, they keep the ball so well. And you're not getting a kick. So they scored. They went 1-0 up. Marley Watkins had scored. And we went in at half time, and the manager had kind of had a discussion and kind of had an open discussion about how to approach the game. Now, I'd kind of tried to put forward that, look, we need to change it now as opposed to, I don't want to go 2-0 down and with 20 minutes to go. And then, so we ended up changing it, not because of me. The manager obviously decided, listen, we're going to throw Botti Biabi on, who ended up, like I said, going down to Swansea. So he was young, he was so raw, but he had enough about it. He was physical to cause problems. He comes on. We start the second half really well. We are the better team. Nerves start to kick in for Inverness because it's getting to that time where you're going half an hour to go, or we can see the trophy, we can smell the trophy. They weren't playing as well as they were. Gets a man sent off. Blair goes through on goal. Tremarco gets sent off. We win a free kick 5 minutes later and we score. Peter Grant, great header. Whole place erupts. And at that point, we were far too giddy. We should have taken a step back. See if we'd had 5 minutes to gather our thoughts. I think we probably would have went on to win that game. We went gung-ho. We went at them. And we didn't need to. There was still another half an hour after that where they had 10 men and we were on top. We had, effectively at that point, we had 55, 60 minutes to win the game, but we tried to win it in 25. We committed too many men forward once in about the 85th, 86th minute, and the ball breaks, cracks. David McCracken goes to press on the halfway line and he slips. Unlucky, just slipped, lost his footing. Marley Watkins runs through, cuts inside, shoots. Jamie McDonald, who, to be fair to him in the Hibs game, he was a big reason as to why we were at the final. Yeah. He'd had some unbelievable performances throughout the season, away to your Hibs, away to your Hearts, because they were in the league at this point. I think he'll admit himself he could have done a lot better. He palms it out straight into the path of James Vincent, who taps it in. Yeah. And it was one attack they'd had, I think, since we'd scored, and it was devastating. Like, it was absolutely devastating. So it was a horrible way to end my time at Falkirk because I'd absolutely loved it. I'd loved the club, the people, everything about it, and it was the first time in my career I'd done well at Carlisle, but I certainly wasn't the main man. Lee Miller was the main man. He was the striker. He was playing really, really well. He was scoring goals. I was a pivotal part of that team, but I wasn't indispensable. You know, we had other players in reserve, Francois Oko and other players who could come in. But in that Falkirk team, I was the main man for 2 seasons. I was kind of the one who they relied upon for goals, they relied upon performances. And I took so much confidence in that. Mick as well, probably, to be fair. Mick in the first season was just as pivotal. He was an unbelievable goalie as his careers went on to show. You know, man of the match against Germany, I think he got in the Euros at one point. So,
yeah.
But that was a nice feeling to go into a team and feel that way. And you know, the experiences that I had at Falkirk were amazing. You know, that pressure to win every week, to try and win a league title, to get to a Scottish Cup final. The people that I met, it's an unbelievable club. It really is. From top to bottom, they had an unbelievable youth structure. They've got other youth development players on the wall who have broke through. And again, they brought so many players through. Scott Arfield being one of them. You know, I go back to the example I gave earlier. Stephen A. Smith getting his grounding at Kilmarnock, playing, I don't know what he played, 100 games at Kilmarnock, might have been more, might have been less. Moves on with a better grip. Scott Arfield's the same. Whereas obviously making that move to Rangers, I got caught up in a system where I'd made 2 appearances when I was by the time I was 23. Yeah. So it's just, you never know what's around the corner in football. But that particular game probably was the most gutted I've been after a football game.
Yeah, definitely. You've spells at Dundee, St Mirren, and then back to Falkirk. Did you feel as if these could have been better spells in your career?
I mean, the second spell at Falkirk, of course. You know, there's no 2 ways about that. It was unbelievably disappointing. Dundee and St Mirren. I mean, St Mirren definitely not. When I, you know, to kind of start with the St Mirren spell before I talk about Dundee, the St Mirren one was probably as successful as it could have been.
Yeah.
I was at a stage in my career where I wasn't playing at Dundee. I'd asked the manager to go on loan. He granted me, yes, you can go on loan. St Mirren were cut adrift to the league by about 11, 12 points. In the championship, that is. I had Morton desperate to sign me. They were third. They had a really good year under Jim Duffy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think I had just about every team in between the two keen to take me. But there was something about St Mirren. I was like, I've heard so many good things about Jack Ross. I've got something to prove at St Mirren. I went there, I don't know how long, I never played. It just feels right. I don't know why it felt right, but they were cut adrift at the bottom. So signs there in the January, you know, it was a massive overhaul at St Mirren that year. In the January, they were cut adrift at the bottom, like I said, but I don't know how many points. They were stick on for relegation. I don't know if the bookies had paid out by this point, but they were miles. There were miles and miles off it. And so I got brought in. I was a wee bit short in fitness because I hadn't played a lot of games, but by the time I caught up fitness-wise, I was out the team for a couple of games whilst I caught up with fitness. We also drew Dundee in the Cup as well, and I couldn't play because I was on loan to them and they'd won. So I ended up missing a couple of games on the back of that because the team had done well. But then I got back in the team. I think I played every game between, I don't know, mid-Feb and the end of the season. Scored 5 goals. Jack Ross sat down with us, I think at the start of it all, there's so many new signings, basically wrote down every single game, sat down with everybody and went, how many points do you think we can get? How many points do you think we can get? How many points? Broke it down. It's the first time, you know, that kind of cliche, one game at a time. Mm-hmm. The first, because people, that is a cliche, but generally speaking, that is how football is approached. That was the first time ever that a manager had sat down and went, right, let's look at this picture a whole. Where are we getting our points? How are we getting our points? And we sat down as a group and had an honest discussion about what we could do and how we could do it. And we clawed back enough points that, you know, Ayr United, we were, you know, beating them 2-0 away from home, 5-1 at home, beating Wraith Rovers 5-1 at home. We're beating everybody. Mm-hmm. We really were. We're going to Falkirk, we were top of the league, I think. We got with Dundee United at home, we beat them. We were just picking up points left, right, and centre. The momentum we gathered was unbelievable. And I think 2 weeks before the January window, Jack Ross had ended up in the crowd after a defeat at home to Queen of the South, talking to fans about what he was going to do to try and fix it. So comes to the last game of the season against Hibs at Easter Road. They'd won the league, so it was a sellout. We'd packed out the away end. Hibs had sold at the stadium because it was trophy day. We needed a point to stay up. If we lost, we were in the playoffs. So it was a very even game, is what I would say. And they went 1-0 up in the start of the second half. We came into the game. It was chances at both ends. Then Lewis Morgan breaks forward, cuts right across the pitch, plays it to Stevie Mallon, who kind of fakes to shoot, takes another touch. It was a wee bit heavy. I've cut across the defender and slotted it in the bottom corner. And again, there's clips of it online. I'm sure you'll find them. But St Mirren fans went mental. So in terms of my loan spell at St Mirren, I went there. I scored 5 goals in a four-month period. Played a lot of football. Scored the goal that kept them in the league. That was great, and it justified my decision. I think Raith Rovers ended up in the playoff spot, got relegated to League One, and Morton ended up in the playoffs, I think, and got knocked out in the first round. That's not, it's crazy how football changes as well. See that time, the only reason I was able to sign for St Mirren because Jack Ross had said to me, "Look, I need to get Lawrence Shankland out to get you in."
Yeah.
So I was going to be signing for Morton, right? So Morton wanted me. I ended up going to St Mirren, which meant Morton still needed a striker. At that particular time, Lawrence Shankland was going down to sign for Ayr United.
Yeah.
But ended up going back up the road to Morton when Jim Duffy wanted him. Played against him. I played against Morton 2 times in that season, and Shankland was just okay. He signs for Ayr the season later, and all's forgotten. It's unbelievable, honestly. Like at St Mirren, I didn't play with Shankland at St Mirren, but as far as I was aware, he struggled. And it just shows you maybe the right manager, the right club, the right person, just to get that bit of confidence. And he went to United, and some of the goals he's scored recently, he's scoring regular in the Premier League, and he's played for Scotland. He's scoring goals for Scotland. So it's a funny game, football, but and it just shows you that if he at that moment in time is struggling for confidence, or the club wasn't the right fit, or he wasn't playing in a system that suited him, all of a sudden you get a couple of years at Ayr where he's unbelievably good. People are Dundee United's now basing their full team around what suits him. And he goes from strength to strength. All credit to him. So the St Mirren spell was great. I loved it. But to go back to my Dundee spell, it was a strange one, is what I would say. It was a strange one. I was quite disappointed, is what I would say, and I think a couple of months into the season it became apparent as to what was expected of me. I think Paul Hartley had signed me as a number 9 who was to stay in the box, and I made a career at Falkirk through dropping deep and getting involved in the play, getting out wide, contributing with assists as much as goals, being heavily involved in the play, and if I wasn't scoring, I was still contributing to the team. Now, in terms of my goal scoring, I think by December time I'd scored about 8 Premier League goals at the start of December, which was great. My form dipped slightly towards Christmas though. And the problem was, what was being asked of me at Dundee, not to really get involved in the play, but to stay higher up the pitch. I wasn't a hold-up player. I wasn't going to win flick-ons. So if I wasn't scoring, I felt like I wasn't contributing. So I never scored for a couple of games, and I ended up out the team. Kane Hemmings is my good friend. He'd signed at the same time, and he'd really struggled for the first 6 months. Then they put him in and changed the formation and played one up front against Hamilton mid-December. Kane scored a hat-trick. And from that point forward was the best player in the league without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah. He was unplayable for 6 months. He ended up getting nominated for Player of the Year. I stayed in the team out wide left again for maybe 8 or 9 games, and I did okay, Scott. Like, I was in the team and I was staying in the team because we were doing well. I don't think we lost a game in those 8 games, but you could have put anyone out there. I was just running back. I was doing a job for the team, but then we goes to Ibrox and we played. Even to be fair, we played Celtic at Parkhead and got a 0-0 draw, and I did fine. But then we played Rangers in the Cup, and I played out left, and we get beat 4-0. We get absolutely hammered, and I ended up doubling up as a left fullback, and I was just it was totally alien to me, and I fell out the team, and I didn't really play again that season. So although I'd kind of started 25 games or whatever else, it was a season of 2 halves, put it that way. I'd started so well, scored a lot of goals, and then the other half of the season, my confidence had dipped. I hadn't played so well. Kane was on fire. You had Greg Stewart as well, Gary Harkins. You're going for that step from Falkirk to Dundee, where it's Championship to Premier League, and there's maybe 2 or 3 other players in your position as opposed to maybe 1. And if you're not playing, other people are getting opportunities. So I had, when Kane scored that hat-trick and things, I had no complaints about being out the team. I just had to stomach it. I had to swallow it because the team was doing well. But it gets to the following season and Kane signs for Oxford. Greg goes to Birmingham. Manager tells me, right, first game of the season, you're going to be starting at Ross County. brilliant, fair enough. Started up front, scored 2 goals. We won 3-1. What a start to the season. Unbelievable. In team of the week in every paper gone. You know, it been talked about in the highlights of sports scene, all the things that come with having a good game, which you enjoy. Then the following week, we played Rangers, played up front myself, and wasn't in the game. Didn't play particularly well. Chris Sutton slaughtered me on the BT Sports. But I'm still thinking, well, it's 2 games in. We've got 3 points away at Ross County. We've got beat by 1 goal at home to Rangers. It's no disaster by any stretch. With Hamilton at home in the next game. Played in that game, I hit the post, did fine. And then I just never played. He just never picked me again. And that's when I ended up going on loan. So, you know, I was quite happy to be on the bench for Dundee in the first season when I could look at it as I could take a step back and go, well, I can see why I'm not playing. But second season, like, he just made his mind up. He just literally made his mind up. And there was nothing I could have done at that point. I don't know. He put me in a game for 60 minutes against Partick Thistle at home, and it never went particularly well. Get taken off after 60 minutes, and that's how I ended up at St Mirren. And like I said, my relationship with the manager at that point was fine. I went on loan because I wasn't playing. I didn't really understand why I wasn't playing, but I ended up going on loan, having a great 6 months. And then after that loan spell, I was still a Dundee player, but Neil McCann was the manager.
Yeah.
He wanted to keep me because he knew I could sniff out a goal. In my head, I'd left Dundee. I didn't want to be at Dundee anymore. So I ended up moving on to Dundee. And at that point, they'd said, well, you can leave, but we don't want you signing for another Premier League team. So they wrote that into the kind of release, the agreement, that you can leave, but you can't sign for another SPL team. So I had Falkirk, St Mirren and Dunfermline all chasing after me in the championship. So kind of understood that was going to be my next move at that point.
Mm-hmm. And what was Falkirk? How was your second spell at Falkirk like?
So going into my second spell at Falkirk, it was obviously it wasn't good. Peter Houston was the manager, so I was at a point in my career where I had 3 clubs chasing me. At that point, you know, I'd earned good money at Dundee. Dunfermline were offering me the most money, but I didn't want to go to Dunfermline. I wanted to go to St Mirren, or I wanted to go to Falkirk. I liked Jack Ross. I liked Peter Houston. It was a coin flip. It really was a coin flip. Like, I had no preference as to where I wanted to go. The way I made my decision was that I'd actually experienced success at St Mirren. Like, having that last day with the fans, keeping them up, having that full experience of that last 6 months was amazing. So I felt like all I'd experienced at Falkirk was disappointment, even though we'd had such a good team and such a good relationship with the fans and the club and the board. But we just missed out in the league. We just missed out on a Scottish Cup. I wanted to go back there and win something, or do something that, you know, that we could be remembered by at Falkirk. So, and they'd done so well. They'd got to the playoff finals and things the year before. So during that period of time, though, I was going through quite a lot off the pitch, is what I would say. And I was really starting to struggle with a lot of stuff off the pitch. You know, I'm quite happy to be honest in saying that. And even at St Mirren, I was struggling with a lot of things, but Jack Ross, I think, noticed that early doors and managed to get me into a space where I could perform on a Saturday, and which was great. Went to Falkirk. I thought moving back down to Dundee and being at Falkirk, it would help with a lot of things. But I started the season fine in the Betfred Cup, but I wasn't playing well at all in terms of the league. The problem I had was that, just coincidentally, a lot of players who'd played so well for years, just for whatever reason, were just going through a bad period of form as well. So it got to a game against Livingston. I hadn't played particularly well most of the season, and I was going to go and say to the gaffer, listen, I'm struggling with a lot of things away from football at the moment. Like, I need a spell. I just need a spell out of the team. But I'd went in that day, and another one of the boys had actually come in with an injury and said, listen, I can't play. So I felt at that point, I can't go and say now that I can't play either. So I thought, right, I'm going to play the day, give my all, see how it goes. So anyway, we played Livy, and this was part of Livy's transition where they started to go up and up and up.
Yeah.
Livy did well, they beat us, and I was going to go and speak to the manager the next day, but at that point, he was sacked. And it was horrible because I loved Peter Houston, I loved working under him, and I loved everything about the way he worked. And obviously then Paul Hartley came in for Dundee, sorry. They'd appointed him, which, to be fair, at the time I wasn't, I think people have this, Falkirk and Dundee fans think that I had this mad dislike for Paul Hartley. Like, see, at that point in time, I never played, so I went on loan at St Mirren. Like, it's completely normal that you do that if you're not playing. I didn't have any form of dislike for Paul Hartley. Now, when he came in, I probably didn't have the relationship I had with him that I did have with Peter Houston, so I didn't feel I could go and speak to him. So I tried to play through it for a couple more weeks. I trained for a couple more weeks. I wasn't in great condition. I wasn't where I should have been, and I understood that, and I knew that, and I was trying to deal with that myself and get into a position where I could challenge to be playing every week. The manager did give me a couple of weeks off whilst I tried to sort things out, but I couldn't really manage to do that in my head. And I came back, and the manager's attitude had kind of changed and shifted, and I was just kind of pushed to the side and left to get on with it myself. I wasn't included in matchday squads. And listen, I get it. I wasn't in a position to compete on a Saturday, but I was really, really struggling with a lot of things. I really was. And ultimately that had a big effect on it. But I don't want to. I love Falkirk. I love the club. I love the people, and I love to see them doing well again. And listen, see, on reflection, I don't hold any bad feeling towards the manager at the time. I feel it could have been dealt with better? Aye, absolutely. Do I feel that they could have looked after me a wee bit better? Aye, absolutely. But could I and should have done more? Aye, I should have as well. So I understood why I wasn't being picked. I understood why it was what it was like. I wasn't performing well enough, and I was out the team. And it got to the summer, and I felt in a better space, and I wanted to come back and give it a go. But by that point, I wanted to come back, but the club were like, we think it's best for everybody if we come to an agreement and move on. And that point there was like, right, I just want to move on from football now. I want to, I've been dealing with a lot of things away from football for probably 2 years. Like I said, the St Mirren spell, I managed to find it in myself, and Jack Ross was brilliant with me, and that really helped. But I just wanted to move on to football, so I thought if I could get part-time at Dumbarton, have a job, that balance would be good, and I could maybe rediscover my form. But it just, with injury and with work and things like that, it just never really transpired, is what I would say. And that's why I took that kind of leap of faith with Sky, started on a completely different journey. I look back and I have regrets. Regrets is maybe too strong, but I wish things had been slightly different. I wish I'd maybe been more open and more honest, and tried to convey how I was feeling and maybe why things were the way they were. But nobody's perfect. And so I look back, my career just kind of frittered out, is what I would say, and people probably don't understand why. And I'll not delve into the finer details, but it was a hard time for me, and it really, really was. And I look back and I feel I let the club down in my second spell, which I'm still disappointed about. But like I said, people make mistakes, and in terms of my move to Dumbarton, at that point, with my back injury and things, after that happened and I couldn't contribute to Dumbarton either, I was like, nah, I need to get myself away doing something else. And as I touched on at the start of the call, I just don't know where. You don't know where to go as a footballer if that's what you. And I'm not a daft boy. Like I'm intelligent enough. I speak well enough. I've got a good enough education. But at 16, if you leave, you can't walk into any other job other than. So I had my UEFA A license and B license. I went and got those. I committed a lot of my own time and sacrificed a lot to be able to get those. So technically, I could go into management. I could go into coaching. But at 32, when you're still seen as a player and things, it's much more difficult than 4 years down the line. When you're 36, you're finishing playing. They say to you, "Oh, can you take the team, or can you help out? Can you do a bit of coaching?" It's a transition to go from no playing to being a manager or a coach. It's much more difficult. And in football, the same as any environment, really, Scott. You kind of get in through your contacts. So I wasn't probably at the right age. So like I said, I took that leap of faith with Sky, and that coupled with my UEFA license and the experience I've had working in kind of the corporate world over the last 2 years has put me in a place where I'm feeling good. I've got a lot of experience now in management and coaching through Sky, through football, through a lot of things. So I've kind of got a plan moving forward as to where I would like to be and things. So
brilliant. Last question: who are some of the best players you've played with, and what are your favourite stories from your days playing football?
I mean, was a number of players who were really, really good to play with. I mean, if you count my time at Rangers, where the majority of this was training, it was the playing because I only made 2 appearances. But again, I suppose they played in the reserve team. Barry Ferguson's a standout, obviously. Stevie Davis as well, I'll never forget. The first day he signed in his first spell for Rangers, he came round to train with the youth team because the first team won the training that day. So he comes round and he's this wee small guy, no much to him. His jumper was hanging over his hands. We were like, he can't just sign for the first team. Came round and nobody could get the ball off him. he was amazing, to be fair, really, really good. And then obviously went round playing with the first team, and he was there, and he was exactly the same with the first team. Nobody could get the ball off him, and he's went on to have 2 unbelievable spells with Rangers. Obviously, this spell now has been defined this season as to how good he's been. So, him, Barry Ferguson, and Pedro Mendes as well was obviously different gravy.
I love Mendes.
Oh, he was so good, so good. Vice was good as well. He was very skillful. On a Saturday, he would used to drive players up the wall. He had, honestly, the most confidence I've ever seen in a player. He was extremely skillful and nice to watch. But in terms of the other parts of my career, I mean, the 2 years I had it. Do you know who the most underrated player is? Who I've always thought this. See the kind of the spell where I was at Rangers. One of the best trainers now, Kenny Miller. Kenny Miller was always known when I was growing up, or mid-teens or whatever else, as a workhorse. He'll run about, he'll work his socks off. See that spell at Rangers when he was there. See going round to train with the first team. See his game knowledge. See his understanding of the game. See his movement. See his touch. Second to none. I mean, I'm talking about your Barry Ferguson. Obviously, he's played at a high level, Kenny Miller, but like I said, I think that his reputation was always, especially when he played with Scotland and in European games with Rangers, it was very much, you play Kenny Miller up front, he'll work his nuts off and he'll force him into a mistake. But I felt like that was always so unfair because as a footballer, he was different class. He really was. He did not look out of place when it came to the box, like the wee Toro boxes, small-sided games and things. He was so sharp. He's so quick with his thinking and his movement. So, and as someone who was a striker themselves, and me, and as I got older, I lost a bit of my pace, especially after my leg break. But when I was a young boy, I learned so much from him for just watching him. He was excellent, really, really good. Lee Miller was excellent as well in the 2 years at Carlisle. Obviously, he'd had a great career up in Scotland as well. He was different class as well. But I've played with a number of players across my career who have been good, even down in England. Played with a boy, Ben Marshall, who is, I don't know what he does now, but he was excellent. He went on to play for Leicester and moving for 6-figure sums. When I was down at Carlisle, he was an exceptional talent as well. So I've been lucky enough to play with a lot of big names in terms of being at Rangers. So Mick McGovern as well was a goalie. He was
definitely.
He's different class as well. He's honestly the nicest guy you'll ever meet and the softest guy you'll ever meet. And then he'd actually throw himself in front of a bus to stop a goal in the net. He just used to love it, getting hit in the face, getting hit anywhere just to stop the ball going in the net, which is what you want for your keeper. But off the pitch, you would never expect it from him. But he was brilliant, really good captain. So I played with a lot of good players as well. But one of the stories that stands out for me from football was probably, so what used to happen in the European games would be, he would, as I just touched on there, he would play Kenny Miller up front. He would then put Kyle Lafferty on the bench in case something happened to Kenny, or the last 10, 15 minutes of the game, he would put him on and I would be in the stand. So that was kind of the 3 strikers he would take with him on European trips for a spell. Don't get me wrong, you had other players like your Naismiths and different people who could fill in there, but that generally speaking was the squad he took. So we played Man United at home in the Champions League. So I goes, but I make the bench this time. So I'm sitting on the bench. Amazing experience initially anyway. We get beat 1-0.
Rooney scored the penalty.
Aye. So we're walking in and I'm looking for somebody to swap my tap with. So I've got the balls and the cones and the bibs and all that, taking them in for the bench. So I says, can I have your top to Chicharito, Hernandez? He says, aye, no worries. Takes it off, hands it to me. I says, thanks. I goes to walk on. He goes, hey. And he wanted my top. And I was like, what do you want my top for? I'm a nobody. I'm a sub. I had to drop all my balls, all the bibs and all that, take the tap off, hand it to him. So I walked into the changing room and the drug testing guys were in. And I always seem to get picked for drug testing, regardless of when it happened or when it was. So calls out the 2 numbers. So it's myself, and it was another young boy at the time who I'm still friends with now, Ross Perry.
Yeah. Is it Darwin?
He's Darwin now, is he?
Aye.
Aye. I knew he was there, but I didn't know if he was still there. So he comes in, and we get sat down or whatever else. And I'm not even thinking, 2 guys for the Man United squad got picked. So they'd obviously been picked first. So I walk in, right, and Paul Scholes is sitting there. So he's just sat there. So me and Ross sit down. Now I'm busting for the toilet, so I obviously need to pee to do the drug test. They're like, guys, just let us know when you need to go. But I'm like, well, I'm sitting with Paul Scholes. I need to make the most of this. I'm not going to admit that I need the toilet just yet. But then I can hear another Man United player in the shower, and he's singing. So I'm like, I wonder who that is, right? So anyway, we sat, and me and Ross sat and spoke to Paul Scholes for about half an hour, 45 minutes. He was telling us how he supports Oldham and talking about his experiences when he was a young boy at Man United and how coming through there was. And we were chatting about Rangers, and we had a discussion for about half an hour, 40 minutes, which was, such a nice guy. It was like, Paul Scholes has kind of that reputation at Man United where he wouldn't do interviews and he just wanted to get on. And he came across like that. He really did. He came across like somebody you went to the pub, you'd sat down, you'd got to speak to a guy next to you. That's how it was. It was that natural. You would never have known. And obviously watching him play as well, he was a superstar. So that was an unbelievable experience. So after about, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes, when the conversation had kind of fizzled out, I was like, right, okay, I'll need to pee now. This guy's still in the shower. So I goes round and he's got 2 bottles of beer sitting at the side where the soap should be. Just see this hand coming around, bringing the beer in, pulls it back, and it was Berbatov. So I've done the pee, and he's sat and I've sat it up on the side. He pulls the curtain back, and he's like, "Don't get those 2 mixed up," as if it was his beer. He's going to pull it around and take a big swig of it. So that was obviously a really cool experience. Doing that and just sitting talking to Scholes as if he was one of my pals. So that amongst obviously all the European trips, playing at Hampden in the Scottish Cup final, playing at Wembley in the Johnson's Paint final, trophy lifting it, walking the steps at Wembley. So some really, really good times in football, some really, really good ones. We also played with a boy, Craig Curran, as well. He was up at Ross County, Dundee United, playing for Dundee for a spell as well. But he was part of the Jim McIntyre team who went up to Dundee United and Ross County, and was part of that. That team that escaped relegation, that were like bottom of the league or whatever else. He was a Scouser. He was mental, Scott. Mental.
Was he?
Oh, mental. So I played with Carlisle with him, at Carlisle with him. So he used to, he was a joker. Like he had a brass neck. He would get up to all sorts. A lot of it I can't repeat on here. One of the stories I will tell you is we used to have an American guy called Frank Simic as well.
Right.
He was from Missouri, and like, don't get me wrong, every single day you would walk into training and you wouldn't be looking your best, put it that way. Everyone came in casual clothes, but Frank took it to extremes where like the stuff he wore looked like it was, I don't know, 50 years. It was ridiculous. And he used to have a pair of trainers, and Craig Curran used to slaughter him all the time for these trainers, which were manky. So Craig was injured one day. This is probably the tamest thing he's ever done. We all go training, so we're training or whatever else. Come back in, like, smell that? Burning? What's burning? And all of a sudden Frank's, look, where's my trainers? Craig had started a fire in the showers and put Frank's trainers on the fire and burned them to ashes. So that was just one of the few stories about him. He was nuts, but Frank wasn't too happy with him that day. Had to get him in his bare feet, but that was quite funny. Quite enjoyed that. But he used to get up to all sorts. But no, I mean, football brings funny stories. That's a story Mark Wilson would like. I can picture Mark doing that to somebody's trainers.
No.
But no, football throws up so many different experiences and so many different random things that you would never expect, like sitting with Paul Scholes or being involved in the Champions League or breaking your leg in 3 places and all the things that come with it and all the ups and downs and the highs and lows. So, I was lucky to be involved in it for 15 years, but with my A licence behind me, with the management experience I've now got within Sky, looking in the very near future to become a permanent manager within Sky, I certainly will be putting myself out there in terms of any footballing, management roles, coaching roles, if the time's right and if they feel that I'm ready to do that. I also really enjoy listening to phone-ins, podcasts, interviews. So, that is something as well which I would like to go down in terms of getting involved in that and being part of that, whether it's a debate, whether it's discussing, kind of current affairs within football. Something which has always interested me, something which I would love to get into. So there's loads of different things that excite me at the moment. Certainly Sky is going to be my mainstay. That's going to be my grounding, where I earn my wage and I enjoy my job. And then on the back of that, like I said, part-time football, with the experience I've got, I feel I could really do a job now going in as a manager in at a club. So I don't know what the future holds for me, but that's certainly something that interests me. Doing these interviews and chatting to people and discussing these things is something I would love to get into as well. Any opportunities that come up, I'll put myself forward. So yeah, there's a lot of things on the horizon after quite a difficult spell in my own life, where I'm now at a stage where I can look forward to the future.
Brilliant. We'll finish recording.